ever been really lost? I mean, you have not got a clue where you are and whether you spend the rest of your life trying to find your way home again. I have. I was in Cardiff, and it was in the early days before I had a sat-nav in my car. And I had an appointment, and I had directions to how to get there. And these directions had been given to me over the phone, and it was at night, and I'd never been to Cardiff before. Now, I drove, and I followed the instructions I had on my little piece of paper, but the more I drove round in circles, the worse it got, and the worse I felt. I no longer wanted to get to my appointment. I just wanted to get home. To see and feel something familiar, something that was comforting and secure. Fortunately, I came to my senses and I ran, and I wasn't far away from where I was supposed to be. I now have the comfort and security of phone maps, which connects to my car and directs me where I need to go. But I do often still find myself not always listening to it when I sort of know where I'm going. I might just confirm the way's right and then I switch it off. But when I'm not sure where I'm going, I listen more carefully, don't I? You know, after the last few weeks, in this time of Lent, we've been led to think about wilderness or desert places in Scripture. We looked at those things that can lead us away from God through the temptations of Jesus. And then last Sunday we heard about Elijah and how God cares for us in the desert places in our lives. We're challenged to think about where is our personal Mount Sinai place, where we go to meet with God. Our text for today, then, is taken from the story of Moses and is perhaps a familiar one to many of us. The Israelites had left Egypt, led by Moses, with the hope and promise of the land of milk and honey, the promised land. They, at this stage in our text, have just crossed the Red Sea and were no longer being pursued by the Egyptians. They could now have thought, well, we can rest here in safety. But this is the time when they began travelling the desert. I'm sure you know that the Israelites travelled for 40 years, guided by God. A journey which should, distance-wise, have taken no more than a few months. Yet it was only by using this time totally dependently on God's guidance that they were shaped into the nation that God wanted them to be. From our point of view of time, the time taken makes little sense, especially as Moses had lived in the desert and therefore would have known how to navigate in that sort of terrain. But what was significant was that the journey, their wanderings in the desert place, was for the sole purpose of shaping them into God's people. They were led both day and night by God's presence. A pillar of cloud by day and by night a pillar of fire. How dependent are we on God to lead us his way? Or are we tempted into going our own direction at times? The cloud and the fire are different substances representing God in different ways for when people are either in the light or the dark. The Israelites needed these different aspects of God's character depending on where they were in their journey at the time. But that is also true of us in our own spiritual journey. our light and our dark times, when things are solid in our lives, or perhaps when we're on a little bit of shaky ground. We can depend on God to always lead us as is his promises, but in different ways as to what we need at the time. Now, there were two ways that God led them. Firstly, the pillar of clouds. Pillars can mean columns, as in buildings, which have sometimes those beautiful architectural columns like, town halls or cathedrals sometimes. They are beautiful, but they also serve a purpose of supporting what is holding. So they're built for strength and beauty at the same time. Does not sound like our God? He's our strength in everything. Sometimes pillar within biblical text means God's feet or legs, as in the book of Revelation. And in this context of leading, paints a wonderful picture of his presence. We read, don't we? By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way. So by day, the sun was shining and it was bright, and the Israelites could see the path that was in front of them. So they did not need a light for the dark, but they did need a guide. When things are going well for us, and perhaps we don't have any major problems, we're in the light, we can see the way ahead. But what we need is a guide not to get lost. It can be easy for us to forget about God completely when our world is okay. I'm fine, what do I need God for? But only God knows the path he has chosen for us, and where that path is going, and what obstacles and what rocks we might come across. As humans without God and his guidance, we can easily stray. We can get lost on our journey of life. The people may have wandered for those 40 years, but it was for God's purpose. If they'd gone their own way and headed straight for Canaan, they would not have been prepared for their future as a nation of God's people. Even in times of light, we need God to guide us towards that purpose that we're chosen for. In times of light, God's presence can be different than in times of darkness. We look at this further, we read that it was a pillar or support of cloud. Why cloud? This country is sort of obsessed with the weather, isn't it? It's a topic of small conversation. Is it going to be sunny or raining? And a lot of people can probably remember where they were on the day of the hurricane in the late 1980s. It's important for us to know what the day will be like. We usually think of clouds as making things dull or blocking out the sun, a covering up of things. But with God, it's a covering that's protective. It's also a symbol of God's glory, the mystery of God, as seen in the Transfiguration, when God's voice came from a cloud. God's leading when we are walking in the daylight, when things are going okay, is his presence and glory, guiding and protecting us, yet maintaining the mystery. Also, to those who saw the people coming, the light shone before them. We as Christians walking in light, when things are going well, need to allow God to lead and show the way before us for all to see. We, even in these times, can be in an intentional desert place of transformation for God's purpose. So the second way that God guided them was by by night in a pillar of fire. We know the pillar is like support. But worry, concern, and the heaviness of this world can make things seem a little dark for us. In those times, God promises to lead with that support pillar of fire. The support is the same. His feet are in front of us. But perhaps we can't see the way ahead. And perhaps we're in danger of falling. We know ourselves at night how easily we stumble over dark paths or things that are not well lit. We as humans can be very tempted to just stay where we are when we can't see a way ahead. But we are encouraged and challenged to trust God to guide us in those times by his leading. So it says, doesn't it, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. Every year people gather, don't they, on bonfire night to see the fireworks light up the sky. In the pitch black, the light of bonfires and that can be seen from a great distance, and its light shines outwards and upwards so we can see what's around us. When we are unable to shine ourselves, God shines for us. But more than this, fire also gives us both warmth and protection from others coming to harm us. Animals in the wild are kept at bay by fire. God's nature in these times of personal darkness is by showing us the way, giving us warmth and keeping us safe. How reassuring is that? We have a God who cares so much for us, both in the good times and the bad times, that he gives us what we need for each of these occasions. His support and glory guiding us by day, or his support and light guiding us by night. We have the promise that he will always guide us in all aspects of our lives, to transform us into the person he desires us to be and for his purpose. Those verses also says, neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. God never left them to stumble in the dark or failed to protect them by day. God's guiding for the Israelites was for the purpose of transformation into his people. Our desert walking can be the same. Being Christian does not exempt us from things challenging our faith. But just as the Israelites continued, our journey does not stop in the dark times of our lives, in the night times. By trusting in his promises, we become the person he needs us to be, shaped by his guiding and light. Wilderness walking is part of being a disciple of Jesus. When we are uncertain of the way to go, his presence is always there to guide us if we seek him. God will make a way, even when we can't see where the future path may be. God's presence is there, is here, and available to each and every one of us, and every step of the way. In his name, amen.